Good morning. My name is Sandy Moore, Sandra Moore, but everyone who knows me or works with me calls me Sandy. I am president of Urban Strategies and have the deep pleasure of working with the development team. The development team selected by the Tampa Housing Authority and endorsed by Mayor Buckhorn and the city to do the work that we're going to talk about here today. That team has got a lot of members. Some are here, others will be joining us. I'm going to say for the moment, McCormick Baron Salazar, represented by Stan Mulvihill, leads that team. We've got AECOM here, we've got Element Engineering, we've got Cooper Johnson Smith Architects, Tierra Engineering, Fishkind Associates, Crossroads Engineering. It is a broad and deep team that's been tasked to do some enormously exciting work. So I got picked today to lead out for the team and to facilitate our press conference this morning. Let me just say a couple of things. I am not a stranger to Tampa. It's absolutely wonderful to have the opportunity to do this work. We're honored to have been selected. I'm personally honored because my absolute best girlfriend in the world is from Tampa, Sandra Farragut. When I say that over in West Tampa, everybody seems to know some Farragut story. And she holds me highly accountable for great performance here in Tampa. The more important part about that is when we came to Tampa, I had a sense from a Tampa native of the deep and abiding importance of doing work here, anywhere here well, but in West Tampa particularly well, with a focus on the history and the culture and the deep roots of the African American and the Cuban community in West Tampa. So when I go home tomorrow, she'll want a blow-by-blow report of how are things going in Tampa. And I think that I will be able to say to her, quite fine. So let's get started this morning. And let me say to you that the way this team is composed is to bring together the absolute best group of professionals to plan for the physical revitalization of this area. But the driving force of that planning has people at its center. So our portion, the urban strategies portion of the planning team, is to work very, very carefully with the Tampa Housing Authority and the City of Tampa to make certain that people, the current residents of the planning area and the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the anticipated future residents, because when this place pops off into the beautiful and vibrant new community that it will be a magnet for new residents, new businesses, economic vitality, a connection, a deep connection to downtown, a bridging of every single river and track that may have separated this community. And people have to be at the center of it. So that has been our charge. I had the great pleasure for a lot of years of working in a volunteer capacity. He is a volunteer and me as a volunteer with Mayor Buckhorn long before he was mayor. And he made it plain once we were selected, and he learned of that. Sandy, we need to keep people at the heart. So this transformation plan is a transformation plan about people and place. I'm going to stop there. Thank the Tampa Housing Authority for selecting us. Jerome Ryans, Leroy, Stephanie Gilmore. We really appreciate it. And step away from the mic and welcome up your leader, our leader, Mayor Buckhorn.
First of all, let me recognize two people. Chloe Coney, who is the District Director for Congresswoman Kathy Castor. As all of you know, Chloe is a longtime neighborhood activist and someone who believes in the power of inner cities and the power of transformation of inner cities. And Chloe and I have shared this dream for decades, that somehow we would make a difference together in our careers. And I think we are now very close to that happening in this historic West Tampa neighborhood. Jim Clore, one of the housing commissioners, is here. Jim, thanks. But let me tell you why we're here. And Sandy, thank you. And Sandy has done an amazing job making sure that we always keep the people whose lives will be affected by this at the forefront. I mean, change is never easy. Change is never comfortable. But I can tell you the status quo never works either, and particularly in the neighborhoods that we are talking about. 3 years ago, when I was elected mayor, I knew that we were standing on the precipice of an amazing moment in Tampa's history, a time where we were going to decide what we were going to be when we grew up, a time when we were inches away from living up to those aspirations and those dreams that everyone who lives here has for this community and for themselves and for their family. But I knew we had to take some steps in order to accomplish that. I knew that no neighborhood could be left behind, that it wasn't just about downtown prospering, but it was about all the neighborhoods associated with downtown prospering and all the neighborhoods that touch our urban core being part of a common solution. And so we launched the INVISION program with the help of the Urban Land Institute and some other experts from around the country who came to help us plot out what that future could look like, how we could connect these neighborhoods, how we could realize that common destiny, how we could make sure that that rising tide floated all the boats. And so we created this plan after 18 months of work, after 1,700 online participants, after over 1,000 residents joined in with us to help create the INVISION plan. We created a blueprint for what this community could be over the next 25 years, particularly in the urban core. And as all of you know, urban areas around America are economic engines that are driving this country's economy. That is where innovation takes place. That is where a culture of entrepreneurship takes place. That is where young people are flocking back to the urban core all over America. And we are at the forefront of that. And so using that INVISION plan, we started to look at the various neighborhoods that will help us succeed, that are connected in one way, shape, or form or another. Looking at Ybor City, looking at the old Central Park Village and what is now Encore, where out of the ground is arising a whole new neighborhood. Looking at West Hyde Park, looking at the West River, looking at the river as the center of our urban experience, not the western edge. Because we can't continue to be limited by what is our best asset as a community. That river is the best asset that we have in our urban environment, and we need to celebrate it. We need to encourage people to use it. We need to facilitate growth around it, all the while protecting that natural asset. And when we looked at this West Tampa area, we looked at neighborhoods that needed our help. We looked at North Boulevard homes. We looked at the 150 acres that make up this study area. 150 acres largely owned by one government agency or another. 150 acres, portion of which we park trucks on and have for decades. Land that is high and dry, that has great view corridors into downtown, that is either on the river or a half a block off the river. You can't tell me that parking trucks on that piece of property is the best use of that piece of land, nor is it an asset for the West Tampa community. We looked at the environment in North Boulevard homes, and I spend a lot of time in there. I was there 2 weeks ago, standing amongst shell casings and looking at a pool of blood. 1:30 in the afternoon, half a block from Mount Pleasant Church. There was a shooting. 2 brothers were out in the front yard playing football. There were kids everywhere. And somebody came up and decided that because he had a gun, over whatever the beef was, and I don't have any idea what the beef was, but he was going to settle that beef with his gun. Shot and killed one of the brothers, and the other one, I suspect, is still in the hospital. And when I look at those little kids that were there, and I look at those little kids that I see almost every day as I come through here, they deserve a better life. They deserve the opportunity to succeed. And they can't succeed in this environment. The odds are stacked against them. It is our moral obligation to change their lives and change this neighborhood. So that's what we're going to do. We have spent about a year and a half working on this, engaging in neighborhoods, talking to them about their hopes and their aspirations, getting their input. We recognize that it's not going to be easy. We recognize that this is a long-term plan. We recognize that this is going to be expensive. We recognize that there are some people who will never be comfortable with change, regardless of how horrific and how horrendous their living conditions are. We recognize that. And there will be people who will object to this plan. We know that. But I will tell you that this plan will change neighborhoods and by extension will change lives and provide a better opportunity for those young people that are here today, all the while reflecting and complimenting and engaging on the amazing history of West Tampa. From the cigar workers to Moses White's barbecue, from E.J. Salsina's father's store at the corner of Main and Howard, to Clara Fry, to Howard W. Blake, to Garland V. Stewart. We will pay tribute to that history, but we are going to change the future for the people that live here. This is big, this is bodacious, this is exciting, this is a game changer, and at the end of this, those little kids we see out there today that right now have a very limited future will have a much better future, and this will be a neighborhood that we will be proud of. We can do this, folks. We can get this done. It won't be easy. Our partners at the Housing Authority know how to do this. They do it as well as anybody in the country. We're going to get this done. We have to, for them and for our future. Thanks, Andy, and thanks to the great team.
That's resolved. Gives me great pleasure now to bring up the Executive Director of the Tampa Housing Authority, Jerome Ryans. Now, let me just say two things very quickly. THA is key to this. They're absolutely key to it because they are the housers of responsibility for many of the families that we're talking about. So you can't do this without them. And therefore, they've taken a great lead in the master planning for this area. Please give a listen to Jerome Ryans.
Thank you, Sandra. Before I make any comments, I want to acknowledge the mayor for his big picture vision of this community. There's a lot of mayors in this country, but it's not one like this one. He makes a difference. He makes a difference. And I also want to acknowledge a couple of people on my staff that I think has been instrumental in helping put this plan together. And that's Leroy Moore and Stephanie Brown Gilmore. You guys stand up for a moment. Stand up so people see you. And of course, one of my bosses sitting over here, Jim Clore. You know, it's interesting, when I was sitting there and I got to thinking about, my time in public housing. I spent about 18 years in public housing myself, and things were different then. I'll have to admit that, and things have gotten worse since. And I've come to one conclusion. The only way that we can solve many of the problems in public housing in this country, not just in this country, but in our own community, is simply tear them down and start all over again. That's what we're going to have to do. We don't have a choice. We got to tear them down and start all over again. And the mayor's absolutely right. We can do better. We can do a much better job of taking care of our children. We can do a much better job of providing opportunities for the residents living in public housing. We got an opportunity here now to transform the lives of the people living in public housing, especially in North Boulevard. And we got an opportunity to tear down old units and build back new and give our residents some choices. That's what's important. I think it's also important, too, to realize that relocation is not going to happen overnight. It's not imminent. We don't have any money at this time to do that. But I think you got to have a plan. You got to have a starting point. And the mayor's absolutely right. But we've been partners for a while here now, and we believe that we will make it happen. We will get it done, and we will find the money to get it done. And I'm just pleased to have somebody like him, in our corner, because it's so important to us to make a difference in our communities. Also, I might add, too, that residents, are looking for an opportunity. You'd be surprised at the conversations that we have with residents about transforming their own lives. All they want is a chance. And we can start by getting this project started, getting people out of those situations, giving them choices, providing them with educational opportunities and training. It is so very, very important for the next generation that we do a much better job than what we've done in the past for public housing. Now, it's interesting, and I talk about this mayor all the time because even when I'm in Washington, he's all over the place. But I'll say this to you, that this is probably the hardest working mayor I've ever seen in my whole entire life. I don't know if I could work for him because I think he works 24 hours a day. But he's always been about the business of making a difference. Even before he became mayor, we had conversations when I first moved here. And he talked about this city and what he wanted to see in this city and the things that we could change in this community and all of that. And now he's mayor and he's doing those things. So Mayor, my hat's off to you for the real job that you do in this community and the commitment you've made not only to public housing, but to the residents of this community. Thank you. Oh, one other quick item. The mayor mentioned one other thing too, and I think it's so very, very important, and it's about the culture and the history of this community. We cannot ignore that, regardless of what we do and how we do it and what we put together. We have to keep that in the forefront. So again, thank you.
All right, so now we'll get down to an introduction of the plan. Let me say this quickly. Remember I told you this is a plan about the transformation of people and place. You're going to see first what we're talking about in terms of the transformation of place, understanding that we start with people, we continue with people, and we end with people at the end of the day. So I'm going to ask Pete to come up and get us started and walk us through. Pete will give you an idea of what the future can look like in this revitalization, understanding that we know and understand completely that we've got to anchor it in the deep history. So don't be fooled by what's the pretty new stuff that is to come. It won't float in the air. It will be tied to what the people of this community have loved for a long time. Pete.
Thank you. Good morning. As Sandy said, my name is Pete Seckler. I'm with AECOM, and I've been privileged to be your principal urban designer for the INVISION Tampa project as well as West River. And for my portion of this discussion, you know, in a few minutes, Stan and Sandy are going to walk you through the kind of places that we envision here and what kind of opportunities that presents for the people that are here now and the people that will be here in the future. I think the link that I want to draw is the substantial amount of conversation that we've had from ULI through INVISION Tampa to this project to really understand how the community views this area and how they envision the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about when we do a master plan project like this. So to back up a couple of steps, INVISION Tampa was really about leading a discussion community-wide about the center city, about how we can collaborate as a community to better connect people and make more livable places in the center city of Tampa. That fundamentally, that's what the conversation was over a couple of year period of time. When we did that work, we led that conversation in a number of ways. One of the things we did was we went out into a number of the neighborhoods and put our feet on the street, did walking tours, had specific community meetings. We had a community meeting in this room with probably 50 to 80 people. We took a walking audit for 2 hours around the neighborhood to try to learn how folks actually see the community from the sidewalk, how you see it when you walk into a business and use a business, what the relationship is between the neighborhoods and the river and the neighborhoods and each other. So we did that at a fairly fine-grained level. And the kinds of things that we heard about were the importance of better river access, having more diverse and quality choices for housing, enhancing education and what the opportunities are, not only for kids, but also for adults, thinking about the future of transportation in downtown Tampa and making sure that we accommodate that, understanding the culture and history of this place as a place that has an enormous background for all sorts of activities and people that have grown out of this community and have now are leading Tampa and leading in other parts of the country. How we think about crime and safety, as Mayor Buckhorn noted. Thinking about just beautification and economic development and starting a business here. We met some of those kind of folks and got their perspective on what the environment is here within the neighborhoods, the historic business area, and so forth. And so when we embarked on this project, sort of transitioning out of INVISION Tampa as a broad-based planning project into something that was a little more site-specific here, West Tampa, North Hyde Park, West River, really thinking about these areas together, we really had a context that there are close-in neighborhoods in downtown Tampa. They affect each other. They're connected to each other. And if we can think about recasting this area as a higher quality, better performing, better outcome opportunity for people of all ages, all situations, then we're going to lift all the boats of all the surrounding neighborhoods. We will benefit all of downtown Tampa. So the specific assignment that we were given dealt with the property in the red line, which generally is Columbus to I-275, Rome to the river, and then to think a little bit about the North Boulevard corridor and think about Blake High School and J.B. Lane Park. We didn't plan J.B. Lane Park, but just thinking about that important relationship. But also looking a little bit beyond the red line, thinking about West Tampa neighborhood in general, the Main Street businesses, Howard Armenia, North Hyde Park, Riverside, all the things that are sort of going on around us to understand really our context. What are we stitching together here? What are we stitching into? So we looked at specific properties, and some of you may remember when we were doing INVISION Tampa, we looked at some of the streets within North Boulevard Homes and said, wow, the Bones, this is the same street physically that would occur in Hyde Park. But the buildings have reached the end of their usable lifespan, and we've got some other infrastructural things that have just reached their lifespan. So we have the bones of a great place, but it's time to reinvest and renew what this is as a neighborhood. Same thing with the Mary Bethune Senior High-Rise Tower. A great facility. It's provided service for a long period of time, but going forward for the next 50 years, this is not an up-to-date facility. This does not represent the future of the needs and opportunities of the people that are living in this building, and so we need to reposition. Similarly, we looked at the neighborhood, and we understand how the open space is used, how the ball fields are used, the close-in neighborhoods, what's happening in the residential communities immediately to our west, the schools, the Main Street. What are we stitching ourselves into here? This is a major source of conversation among the team as we listened to folks and started developing planning ideas. And so for just a few planning diagrams to kind of kick you off into the more detailed drawings that Stan will get to in a minute, I wanted to just show you how we kind of translated some of that input into a few kind of guiding ideas from a planning point of view. One is just understanding fundamentally streets and transportation. We have an area here that has a number of streets that have been dead-ended or otherwise disconnected from the surrounding community. So in some ways, this has been an enclaved, disconnected area, and our goal is to reconnect it. We need to reconnect it to the adjacent neighborhoods. We need to connect it to the river. We need to make sure that it maintains and has a long-term plan for future transportation connection in the form of whatever transit direction the city ends up taking over the next few years. So this is really about developing a neighborhood that is physically connected and physically stitched into its surroundings so that there's a mutual benefit between the investment here and investment that's happening around us in the form of people reinvesting in their homes, reinvesting in their businesses. We have an opportunity to really make, I think, a dramatic linkage for the entire West River area, because along Willow, for instance, we have the opportunity to connect Willow all the way from the Hillsborough River, all the way down through North Hyde Park, past University of Tampa, through Hyde Park, all the way to Bayshore Boulevard in the Bay. And I think that kind of a physical linkage has profound non-physical implications in terms of unifying and really creating broad opportunities for West Tampa as a great collection of neighborhoods. But also connecting Main Street. And we spent a lot of time listening to the folks that are operating the businesses on Main Street, on Howard Armenia. And what happens is as you move to the east from those locations and get closer to this site, the business environment kind of disintegrates a little bit. And the opportunity for this site is to really provide an anchor to those activities so that Main Street can start to really continue to rebuild and reinvest as a strong business and daily services venue for folks that are providing day-to-day services for folks that are living in these neighborhoods and will live in this new neighborhood someday. And then connecting not only the community to the river, but connecting the river trail all up and down to downtown and beyond, and thinking about opening the educational frontage along the river, maybe repositioning how we think about the schools and how we think about the river walk and the river park frontage as something that really is a shared public amenity that drives quality of life up into the neighborhoods. Right now, we've heard over and over and over again for the last 2 years about how that value and that quality of life has been disconnected from the folks that are living here. So we want to drive that value into the neighborhoods and let people enjoy the river as part of their daily quality of life. So with that, I'm going to let Sandy introduce the actual planning process that we did and what the outcomes were.
Okay, and I'm going to go to Stan to, again, complete the specifics of the place portion of the plan before I talk about people and services and engagement, outreach, and next steps. But as Stan is coming up, I just want to pull out a couple of really important things around what P just told us. You know, I start concentrating on the themes. The names don't matter. The themes matter. That this plan is a big idea. The mayor said that, inside of a big idea. But that's what's going to draw the resources that it takes to get this done. You know, we have the distinct honor and pleasure of working from Miami to Minneapolis and from San Francisco to New Orleans. So we see a lot. And what we know is money follows these kinds of big, comprehensive, integrated ideas, especially when you've got leaders that are no strangers across the aisle to the leaders at the state and federal level. So please understand, we're not talking about a big idea that doesn't have the roots sunk deeply enough to happen. It does. Stan?
Good morning, thank you. I'm Stan Mulvihill with McCormick, Barron, Salazar. We're a national housing developer specializing in economically integrated communities, that is, communities that are mixtures of people and incomes and devoted to urban transformations such as what is proposed at West River. I want to say a couple of words first, though, about why a firm like ours, which has been in existence for some 40 years with Richard Barron and Kevin McCormack and Tony Salazar at the helm, coast to coast, as Sandy mentioned, we often partner together with urban strategies and others. We've worked with ACOM and many housing authorities, but I wanted to say three things that attracted us to this specific opportunity in Tampa. The first one is obviously it's an extraordinary setting. You've already done a lot of the hard work and the heavy lifting in terms of getting the INVISION framework there for us from which we can work. That's an enormous advantage, and then the riverfront is gorgeous, and you know, to me it reminds me of the Upper Charles in Boston. It's really very undervalued. The second very important reason is that your city, this administration, this housing authority has a track record of getting things done when it sets its mind to it. That's extremely important to attract a national developer. We like to think of our caliber. The idea of working with that administration and this housing authority is very exciting, along with the neighbors and the folks in the West River area. So that's the second reason. The third reason is the extraordinary resource of your schools here. We often think of this as an education corridor, and Sandy and I were both just incredibly excited to meet. We met yesterday for the first time, I believe, the principal of Blake High School, and Sandy's comment when we went through there way back over a year ago was, you know, Stan, this reminds me of a mixed income community. This looks a lot like where we want to go. And the reason was because it had folks from all zip codes and all incomes and all races. It was an extraordinary thing. And the arts have an ability to pull those folks together. So part of our task as developers is to tap into that, not get in the way, but figure out how we work with that great beginning and make it happen on its own. Whether we're involved in every development here or not, we have a long way to go. I want to acknowledge so much support we've had from Jerome and Leroy and Stephanie and so many others there. I see many of them, and I want to thank you right off the bat. So let me get started with the plan. One of the things that Sandy and I have touched on, and this has been a theme, I think Mayor Buckhorn also touched on it, is how we go about getting to the plan. And one of the things is getting people together and listening is the very first thing. And that means the residents, it means the business owners, it means people who may never have actually lived in West River or what we call West River, but care a lot about the impacts in the future. They simply care. We need to understand that. And then we bring them together, and we need to start making choices. It's not my choice, it's not necessarily Sandy's or Mayor Buckhorn's. We need to understand what's doable. You can't have a great plan that sits on the shelf. So what I want you to think of is this plan is a development implementation plan. It is a blueprint to go from A to B to C. The details may change, the people may change involved, but the plan itself and the concept goes forward, and that's really with the people involved here. And building that community that works for everyone, and I mean everyone. The track record needs to be residents employed as part of this. It needs to be the businesses doing better and having a game plan. It means all those things, and we got to respect the history of West Tampa. In fact, that's one of the reasons I love my job, is I get to spend a lot of time getting to understand a whole nother community. That is what turns me on. I want to mention, Pete already talked about the various areas here of the redevelopment plan. The yellow is largely North Boulevard homes owned by the Tampa Housing Authority. I'm not sure what to call that, purple is the city property. It's largely the city wastewater division and some other buildings that are leased by the county. And the blue is the the county school district properties, which include so many Blake High School, Dunbar, Stewart, and Just. And we can get into that more in detail, but for this purpose, we'll just move on. I'm going to start with how we built the plan with AECOM and with UDA and with all of you. The first thing is we concentrated on the yellow parts, which is the North Boulevard homes. That is, in fact, the catalyst for change. And that requires a total demolition and relocation of the area, which is not imminent anytime soon, but is going to happen under a methodical way, and I'll let the Housing Authority speak to that if there are questions. But the point is that we are able to create a new network of neighborhood with a park there that's actually very substantial and that is a mixture of incomes in a variety of phases. And it's important to us to get to the first phase large enough that it's critical. Let me tell you a little bit about the pattern of the blocks. And this is something you're already doing in some of your other housing developments. This isn't new for Tampa. We're just simply trying to figure out how to translate it to West River. Here you see that there's a block pattern. We reestablish a front door and doorstep and porch and real street network in a much more dense development, but it still feels very kind and residential and safe. We have areas that are safe inside, they're well parked, and in each of these units, they are indistinguishable from one another in this regard. The quality of the finishes, the way they're laid out, is not dictated by the income of the folks who are there. Roughly, and I'm going to speak just off, in rough terms here, we're expecting approximately about half of this will be in some form or another affordable, which involves public housing, tax credits, Section 8, maybe some workforce, and about half of the units we'll build back will be market rate. Here's an example of, and it's an extraordinary one, but this is West Main Street. This is not far from where, if you look down, I guess it's Willow. Have I got that right about? So we're looking down Main Street, and with the possibility of being able to really revitalize it with a series of senior buildings, with health care clinics and other things below, and be able to build back businesses one by one, as we've done in other communities. It's not easy to do. It's a multi-story building. We're trying to arrive at the right density. And it also provides a great opportunity for new shops and businesses and other services that are currently there. Now, for example, you have the West Tampa Family Health Center, which is there. That's another group that we're dealing with to maybe get them back in this area in a much more robust way. What we want is to be able to have all those services walkable and on-site. You can see some of the various styles of townhomes. This doesn't mean exactly what's going to go into West River, but we wanted to give you some sense of the scale. And in speaking to that scale, let me just throw out, right now in the total West River planning area, we're talking about roughly 20 units an acre of housing, which is relatively modest. We're actually going to increase it up to almost 50 units an acre by the time it's done, but it won't feel overwhelming. That's the goal. So it'll be a place for families and seniors and singles and everyone. Again, at the heart of that is livable places with, public space and splash parks, other things that really start to define that this is my neighborhood. If I move here, this is my neighborhood, this is my space. But then branching out, we have the city-owned property, which is on the left side here. I'm not exactly sure how to do that if you're right along here, right around the Rome and Willow corridor. That's the city wastewater division right now. And Mayor Buckhorn, we've talked about collaborating with the city in this plan. There are other opportunities for other developments to happen beyond us, certainly. But the idea is that we're going to try to create a much more marketable whole here and knit this place back together in the way that the mayor referred to as a much more sensible way to use that kind of valuable asset. You can see how it's right over, this beautiful river view here, the river corridor looking back to downtown. So, for example, these streets, as you see right now, this happens to be one of the North Boulevard homes area. And that looks like a nice picture, doesn't it? A nice transition. But, you say, oh, that won't look like that. Well, we've got about 30 of those developments we can show you from picture to concept to reality, and we can show you them 20 to 30 years later, and they still look like that. Because we also manage what we develop with others. Here's another opportunity. We've talked a lot about trying to get to the riverfront, which is one of the most important things, not only for us, but for the schools, to have much better connection to that beautiful asset, and to open it up for all of Tampa to enjoy. That's part of the key. So in terms of attracting people, right now, this is Willow Street as it dead ends into the property. And obviously, you have to basically trespass to get to the riverfront, which is kind of a shame. What we're going to try to do is create a very dramatic system here by opening up, relocating the ball fields with the school district, and this is something that we've talked with them. It's not a plan necessarily in terms of they've committed to it, but we're working through the idea of how to move these assets to a more sensible location so that we can open up something else, and it's involving many years of discussions. But what this allows us to do is get to a very exciting result, because now suddenly we can open up Willow all the way and create this beautiful riverfront park. It's not the same as Julian B. Lane. Somebody reminded me that there's confusion about this. I'm not going there. This is a beautiful new commercial opportunity with housing above. We've also included, what allowed us to open Willow this way between Just and Stewart is that now we've developed what we call a cafetorium. Stewart does not have its own cafeteria, and there's a state law that you can't have children walk across the street during the school day. It's a state law. There's nothing your school district can do about it. What this allows you to do is create a separate eating facility that will also be open to the public. What we want to do is have it be kind of like a Tavern on the Green, or something where you can think of, I don't know, there's lots of examples, where you have a great public facility that can be rented out or done for groups or bring community together, and it's right on the riverfront. And then during the day, during the school day, it's functioning as a cafeteria. It's a school space. So what we're looking at is ways to collaborate with the school district, just as what we're looking to collaborate with the city. So this then opens up, and what we do, I want to make it very clear, we're not losing any school fields, not one. There are some other items here. You'll notice that the Yellow Jackets, we're figuring out how to deal and address with their ball fields here. The primary areas here now include potentially a new community center, which could accommodate uses, boys and girls clubs, and other things and other activities. Give you an idea of the riverfront. You've done this from INVISION. You can see the kind of riverfront that we're after, something that's much more accessible and usable by all. This is kind of an interesting shot. This is the edge of the track area behind Stewart there. Here's the river. It's a beautiful river. I'd love to go sail in it. I don't know about you, but it really is a beautiful, wonderful, a lot of crew boats and things like that. This is where we see the park. It'll anchor the West River area and also be open to the public and help attract others to this very, very exciting place. And above will be housing or other offices, and below will be retail opportunities and many other things that, right now the riverfront is really not commercialized at all. So what we're trying to do is find a balance between passive recreation and exciting destinations. And then our artist went ahead and drew an evening scene where you could imagine maybe something pretty fun. The other thing that we want to throw out there, it's an idea, is that if we were able to find the funds in the future, there's an opportunity to do more with the educational corridor, which allows us to build campuses similar to, I think the school district has something called Barrington Elementary, which combines K through 8 experience. And what we're trying to do is work with them over the long term to figure out a way to do K through 12, meaning you have everything from Dunbar and Just Elementary and Stewart to Blake High School, and it's all in this one corridor. And the idea here would be to potentially build a new Just Elementary here, just next to the Stewart, and create one big K through 12 campus right on the river, but allowing us to develop this corridor much more effectively for additional housing. I've got just a couple more slides and then I'm going to move off. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we now have, I think, about 820 units of public housing that are in the primary area. We can get to about 1,600 or more units in this plan. Won't be all at once. It looks like it's over a decade. In terms of the setting, you can see here we have that, what we were talking about, that Willow Street corridor right here, River to Bay, and all this. And now you see the logic behind it and how we've linked all back in here up to Columbus and opening up opportunities for West Main and so many others and taking advantage of it. That's my report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stan. And so I'm going to move us through our people slides pretty quickly because I know that we are running long, but it's a big vision, and it really deserves the time that we're so glad you're giving it to take a look at it and really think about it. So we're going to go to what does all this mean when we say that people are at the center? What does it mean, and how do we make certain that we preserve and protect and promote the history of West Tampa while we lay down a foundation for a much stronger, more vibrant future? Well, Stan told you, and I'd like to hold it, that slide, please. Stan told you that we did an enormous amount of listening, and that's exactly right. We've had the opportunity, a lot of communities don't provide us that opportunity, but we've had the opportunity here to do months of outreach and engagement in the entire planning area. Stan and I spent probably 2 full weeks meeting with folks across every single strata of the community that is North Boulevard Homes, that is Mary McLeod Bethune housing, that is the surrounding for sale housing in the neighborhood, business interest, and and everything in between. So that listening led us to a conclusion that we needed to develop with that community a set of guiding principles. And that's what you have here. I'm hoping that many of you will join us tonight in our community meeting, this will be the first thing that you see. These are the principles that help us be able to tell you confidently that we've engaged residents and stakeholders, and we understand and have heard what they're saying. I won't run through them completely, but there are a couple that I think are very important. Residents will be at the forefront of the decision-making process. For a community, a development community, a housing authority, and a city to commit to that is a big deal. And it's a public commitment. We'll act with openness, honesty, respect, and transparency. Very, very, very important. Want to jump down to number 5. We will reach for new and exciting opportunities and possibilities that embody hope for residents. This is a partnership for change. Residents understand that to get there, you've got to be willing to make some changes. Committed to cultural diversity and community building. This isn't a one-off. That's why you're talking about 600 or between 600 and 1,700 units. That helps to really build back out to a larger community and away from the isolation of 820 stigmatized public housing units. So this is the guiding principles. Number 4, we will honor the rich history of Tampa and the lived experience of its residents. So those will be up on the wall. They have been up on the wall for the last 2 public meetings that we had with the community. They wordsmithed it until some more sides of my hair turned white, but we're there. Next slide, please. This is the process that we've gone through. Again, 9 focus groups, 268 surveys of THA residents. With the help of Beth Latham, we've got probably over 400 people who have been actively engaged beyond or including that 268 public housing residents. Engagement with Tampa leadership. I've had so many meetings, met so many wonderful people, as Stan has. 3 big community meetings where we went over the data sets that our team has been collecting and analyzing, data sets from the Housing Authority, data sets from the census, data sets from the universities who've done a series of various reports about the area. Then priority setting, we've been very straightforward all along the way, saying that this is going to require a series of choices and trade-offs. Not everyone will get every single thing that they want in this transformation, but it will be an exercise in compromise and priority setting. Research, continuing research, and all of that led to the development of the Human Capital Plan. I'm going to take just a couple more seconds to tell you about a Human Capital Plan. It is the tool of urban strategies trade. There's a physical development plan, you see it here. There is a corresponding human capital plan, because what's going to happen for the people who live there now and you want to live there in the future can't be an afterthought. It can't be an add-on. It has been an integrate part of the planning process. It's a document. It's a livable document. We want to do this work with a passion, but in the event that we're not the team that does the work, the Housing Authority and the mayor have the Human Capital Plan to say, okay, this is the roadmap. I'm going to run you through just very quickly a few of the top recommendations in that Human Capital Plan and the strategies for moving forward, because that's what the plan does. It assesses where we are today, where as a group of stakeholders and investors we want to go in the future, what are the most logical state-of-the-art strategies to get us there. Let's take a look. The top recommendation that we make out of all of that engagement and information gathering is that we have got to get parents and caregivers working in this community. We can tear down the buildings, we can rebuild it, but if we bring back all of the families who are living with subsidy without them having transitioned to a working position, part-time, full-time, within the scope and range of their abilities, this will not work. Fortunately, Tampa's got enough opportunity with this man at the helm, probably increasing and doubling and tripling opportunity for us to put people to work. We are not concerned about it. What we have to focus on is the barrier removal that's going to get us there. We're recommending the creation of something called a Center for Working Families as a model. There are about 3 of them around the country. They have a big investment of philanthropy. The Annie E. Casey Foundation is a big giver to them that really allows us to take a difficult population and focus on getting them working. That's our top recommendation. Next slide. Seniors aging in place. You've got a senior building there. You cannot tear it down and not have a really logical and implementable plan for what's going to happen for those seniors. And, you know, we all are hoping that the seniors, that we're going to keep breeding seniors. We want folks to keep living and having a good life and being able to age in place. So that's our second recommendation. We've got the network of supportive partners. I looked at it this morning. I think that we are up to about 37 agency partners that we've had outreach and engagement with, largely driven by Stephanie's fine work at the Tampa Housing Authority. We've met with them, we've had one-on-ones, we've done outreach. That network will be our foundation for support for the seniors, and we'll tie back to them also with the families. Next slide. Children and families healthy, very, very important point. And the reason that it's in the first phase of what we're recommending in the human capital strategies is because a large factor in the low employment rate of the public housing families in North Boulevard homes is directly linked to their health, the health of their children, or the health of other adults for whom they are responsible in the housing. So we have to marry up a really strong focus on health and healthy lifestyles in order for people to work. A comprehensive health clinic, there are enormous partners there who are already providing some health clinic services. The key is to knit them into a comprehensive approach. Families at the center, the providers coming together to provide across the differences of that community. Not a situation where you may have one household that's got 4 people in it and it's got 5 different healthcare providers who never speak to each other. The integration of that service delivery system is what we're recommending. Next slide. Residents leading. At the end of the day, we can tear all this down, we can rebuild it, we can have as many of these lovely meetings as we want, but unless and until we really focus on strengthening the ability of residents in this community, from those who are there now, who have some distinct needs, to those other 800 that are going to move into this vibrant new community, owning governance and responsibility for their community like what happens in most vibrant communities in any city. And we have to train to that. That is not necessarily where we start today with public housing residents, but we know how to train to it. We've got 22,000 units that we work in across the country in these mixed income developments that are led by the folks who live there. But we have to train to it. It's a bit of a new approach. That was all in phase 1. This is phase 2, and I can't give you the year, the timeline on the phasing just yet. We're not quite there yet, but that would be the top 4 things that we would work on in human capital development in the first phase. I think that's probably over the next 18 to 24 months, but that phasing will know more solidly in just a few weeks. In phase 2, we would then start to focus on the babies from 0 to 12, starting with young children, the goal being young children ready for school, and that would mean to create a first-class, state-of-the-art 0 to 5 feeder pattern to the school corridor. We're recommending that it have a strong health base in it, especially for the low-income families. There is a direct correlation between poor health of the babies and poor performance in school. Next slide. Children and youth succeeding in school, then creating a pathway of success that is related to before school activity, in school performance, after school activity, 0 to 12. It's deliberate, folks. It is not in the head or maybe in the heart or in the gut. It is deliberate. It is the same level of deliberate focus that we're going to give to making certain we reconnect those streets. Next slide. Safe neighborhoods. Now, what I want to say about this is you know, the thing that I love about this work, Stan loves meeting people, and so do I, getting into new communities, but what I love is that these plans, especially the Human Capital Plan, is not static. Given what has been going on in the study area, particularly North Boulevard homes over the since the beginning of this year, into last year and beginning of this year, we're gonna recommend, we couldn't switch all of this in the last 24 hours. We're gonna recommend to move the safety one up to phase 1. There's just gotta be a big and intensive push on safety, because we're not gonna get young women out to come for job training. We are not gonna get seniors engaged to help us bridge with infants. We're not gonna get early, state-of-the-art early ed education. We're not gonna get that corridor of schools working together unless we can really tamp down the sense of safety. Now, one thing I wanna say about that in our recommendation, you will see that safety is not started, our recommendation doesn't start from the outside in. As I understand it, you've got a wonderful police department. That's not where we start, and that's not to say they can't do more, but that's not where we start. We start in the rebuilding of these communities from experience, with safety starting from the inside out. So we're going to recommend that safety be moved up into phase 1, and then it starts with really a local safety council that gets the tools, the best that we know nationally of the tools you bring to people beginning to work together on safety. All kinds of things you've heard before: community policing, hot spotting, resident engagement communities around safety, youth interventions, all of those things, but it is from inside of the community out. So, next slide. I think that brings us pretty much to the end. The key here for us is to put these wonderful and dynamic ideas about place and people on a parallel track and to get moving. This plan is an implementation strategy, and my gosh, we are ready to go. I'm going to bring up Mayor Buckhorn to close us out.
As you can see, and we appreciate your patience, we've been at this for a long time, but it is a complicated process. And I think you can also see that we have spent an inordinate amount of time, probably in the 25+ years that I've been doing this. I don't know any project in which we have spent as much time at the beginning of the process talking to the people who will be affected by this. Because ultimately, long after Sandy and Stan and Pete are gone, long after I'm out of office, long after Chloe is gone, this will be their neighborhood and their community. And so for us, it was important that we get their participation, we get their hopes, we get their aspirations, we get their thoughts incorporated into what we are rolling out today. It's exciting, it's big, it's expensive. It will not be done in 1 year, it will probably not be done in 5 years. I will not be the mayor when this is finished, but we've got to start. And this is where we begin. This is where we start to change those lives and change this particular neighborhood for the better. So we've got a great team that's involved. We've got great partners. We have great relationships in Tallahassee and certainly in Washington, D.C. There is no better time to undertake something of this magnitude, of this size, than right now. And we're committed to doing it. And so we're going to meet with the neighborhood tonight. We're going to roll this out for them. Many of them have already seen portions of this. And we are going to move forward quickly, move forward aggressively. And at the end of this, I think they will say about this moment and about this time and about this group that we did what we were asked to do as parents and as leaders, and we left this neighborhood better than it was given to us, and ultimately that's what it's all about.